What if the door you're calling closed is actually the open door God is using? Paul and Silas were beaten, imprisoned, and rejected, yet they were exactly where God wanted them. Acts 16 shows us why open doors rarely look the way we expect and why opposition doesn't mean you missed God. Hello, God bless you. My name is Samuel Benitez. Today we're going to be in Acts chapter 16, and the title of this message, our first for the new year, is You're Not Stuck, You're Positioned. So we're going to be in Acts 16 today, and I want to welcome you all to one verse at a time. In life, we go through many seasons where, sometimes we're in what we call an open door season, and other times we feel like God has just shut all the doors for whatever reason. And I guess we would call that a closed door season. And I know that many can relate, and I've definitely been going through that for the past little over 3 years, it seems like. Towards the end of 2000, well, really, most of 2022. And by the end of 2022, it was very clear that things were changing. And, 23, 24, 25, it just continued on. And I went from having what we view as nothing but open doors to one door after another just closing on me. And sometimes it just seemed like they were being slammed shut, right? In all different areas, whether it be in my work life, whether it be in ministry, whether it be, a lot of things, right? And we go through these seasons of open doors and everything is going great. And then all of a sudden, everything just changes from one day to the next. No warning, or maybe there was a warning and we just missed it. And, definitely I'm talking about myself, and I've gone through all this for the past couple of years. And I'm sure many of you have as well. And sometimes it takes a little while for us to really learn the lesson that God is teaching us. And I know that's the case with me. I'm a very slow learner a lot of the time. And sometimes I know something and I'm just kind of like stubborn to the reality of it. And it takes me a while to really comprehend what God is telling me that I already know. And when I came to this, I hear that God. And, I understand now. So we're going to be in Acts chapter 16. I gave you some time to get there. We're going to be reading through and stopping in sections and going over the verses. So I'm reading out of the New Living Translation, if that makes it easier for you to follow along. If not, it really don't matter. Any translation is fine. Just understand that I'm reading from the New Living Translation. Unless you're reading from the Passion Translation, I would suggest you don't follow along in the Passion. But that's another story for another day, and many channels have already discussed that. So Acts chapter 16, picking up at verse 1. This is Paul's second missionary journey. Okay, Paul went first to Derbe and then to Lystra, where there was a young disciple named Timothy. His mother was a Jewish believer, but his father was Greek. Timothy was well thought of by the believers in Lystra and Iconium, so Paul wanted him to join them on their journey. In deference to the Jews of the area, he arranged for Timothy to be circumcised before they left, for everyone knew that his father was a Greek. Then they went from town to town, instructing the believers to follow the decisions made by the apostles and elders in Jerusalem. So the churches were strengthened in their faith and grew larger every day. So we see that Paul is on his second missionary journey here in Acts 16. And first he went through the cities of Derbe and Lystra, and that's where he met a young disciple by the name of Timothy, which should be very familiar. That name should be familiar to us, First and Second Timothy. This is where he comes across this young disciple, Timothy. And Timothy's mother was a Jewish believer, but his father was a Greek. So he was, of a mixed marriage. And he was well thought of, Timothy. He was very well respected amongst the believers in Lystra and Iconium, so Paul wanted him to come along. And in deference to the Jews, he decided it was only right and proper to make sure that Timothy was circumcised. I know that's something that is very common to us nowadays. All male children seem to be, circumcised right after birth, shortly after, within the first week. And but back then it was a very big deal amongst the Jewish people. Now it's just common, but it meant something to them. Like, you had the Jews, when Gentiles came to Christ, they expected them to be circumcised like they were. And we know that physical circumcision has nothing to do with a spiritual circumcision, but in this instance Paul felt it was necessary in deference to the Jews of the area who knew that Timothy's father was a Greek. Let's just get you circumcised for the sake of the Jews in the area. And then they went from town to town instructing believers to follow the decisions made by the apostles and elders in Jerusalem. Okay, so picking up in verse 6, we'll read through 6 through 10 right now. We see a call from Macedonia. Verse 6, next Paul and Silas traveled through the area of Phrygia and Galatia, because the Holy Spirit had prevented them from preaching the word in the province of Asia at that time. Then coming to the borders of Mysia, they headed north for the province of Bithynia. But again, the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them to go there. So instead, they went on through Mysia to the seaport of Troas. That night, Paul had a vision. A young man from Macedonia in northern Greece was standing there, pleading with them, "Come over here to Macedonia and help us." So we decided to leave for Macedonia at once, having concluded that God was calling us to preach the good news there. So we see that Paul and Silas are on their second missionary trip, and they're traveling through these cities, but the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Jesus, is telling them where to go, when to go, and preventing them from going to certain places that may have made more sense to them at the moment. We see that Paul and Silas are not making their own travel plans.